Beyond the Headlines is sponsored by Flow.
Education Minister St. Edwin is supporting the school of thought that some school regulations are outdated amid the intensifying hair policy debate. The conflict has escalated in one instance to a matter for litigation. A court injunction since allowed a student who was previously barred access to an education because of the length of his hair back into the classroom while the parties await a court decision. Education officials have been treading cautiously in arriving at a resolution, but Minister St. Edwin has conceded that some school rules have outlived their usefulness in light of social transformation that have occurred over the decades. A number of other civil society groups have also supported that sentiment, including Hear Us Out, human rights advocates, and the National Students' Council. Edward is, however, supporting calls for a revision of archaic rules in favor with those that are more aligned with modern times.
It's a matter of the ministry having a stance per se. This is a conversation that is ongoing. We did meet with one of the stakeholder groups. It was a very cordial meeting. The exchanges were very frank. And as I said, it's a conversation that must continue because, this is 2022 and some of the policies, some of the rules that would have informed decisions at the school level, say 10, 15, 20 years ago, obviously need to be revised, need to be looked at. But we don't want to do it in a piecemeal way. And so we are doing a comprehensive review of rule books across the secondary school system for the time being, hoping that we can come up with rules and regulations that are more in keeping with the times.
Some have argued that the injunction granted in the St. Mary's College hair controversy may set a dangerous precedent as it may lead to the degradation of respect for all school rules and discipline. Although the minister declined to comment on the specifics of the case, he disclosed that the ideal situation would have been for the matter to be settled outside of court.
There's a term in the legal fraternity, sub judice, meaning that once a matter is before the court, it is never wise for public officers to make pronouncements on those. So what I can tell you is that the parent who did file the injunction, I have met with him as minister. The senior management team of the Ministry of Education, they too have met with him. And for us, the ideal is for that matter not to reach the courts and for us to reach an amicable resolution where that particular matter is concerned. But in terms of the specificity of the case itself, it is not prudent for me to make any public pronouncements given that the matter is before the courts.
The minister did emphasize that the Ministry of Education has engaged in wide-scale dialogue with all stakeholders to ensure that a thorough review of school rule books can be completed. Reporting for the Hot 7 TV News, I am Kareem Nelson.
Welcome back, and that Kareem Nelson report taking us into Beyond the Headlines this hour. We are talking here. The hair debate continues to grow on the island. My next guest shares a very interesting perspective in the wake of a court decision to issue an injunction to a school for immediate reinstatement of a student who was barred from entering school on the first day of the school year. Joining the discourse, influencer and advocate on social and development issues, Mr. Nigel Edwin. Welcome, Mr. Edwin. Welcome to the debate. Thanks for joining us. I know we've been delayed about 2 weeks, but I'm just glad to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Shannon. As the saying goes, maybe better late than never, but I'm pleased to be here. I'm looking forward to share my own perspective on this so-called hair debate, and I'll explain a little later why I call it so-called. But thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, excellent. Let's start off with your time in school. Shall we first walk us through your school years? What was it like for you and your peers then, in terms of attending the St. Mary's College? What existed?
Well, and you have seen several clips. I think there was a much more liberal sort of acceptance of I don't know if to call it afro, but overgrown hair, if you like, But what I could remember is that the few people who used to have afros in my class, they used to be sent to the back of the class for obvious reasons, right? Sometimes, you know, if they're in front of a student that distracts that student from them seeing the board, they would have asked them to go to the back of the class. And if you allow me, before I really go into some of my own personal experiences, you know, I've heard that the hair debate, for me, it's really not a hair debate. And I heard the president of the Principal Association, was she? A while ago. And this is the angle I want to take. But since it has been dubbed a hair debate, I did some research. You know, I asked, well, but why did this whole hairstyle codes, you know, enter the school, so on, institutions and so on? And one of the things I found out, this is not a St. Lucia thing. This is a universal thing. And, you know, every nook and cranny in the world, some school has similar hairstyle codes. And there are reasons for it. In fact, I remember some years ago when I think it involved Sky Suma's son, when the matter went to court. And my information is that there was never a decision taken. But, you know, I was close to that case, persons who were involved in that case. But basically, the arguments that were being presented were basically leaned on the side of the school. And you know, and in my research, I found out that there are practical reasons for hairstyle codes, right? And I'm not defending. Let me just say up front, I think the rule has to be adjusted. I think the rule in itself is very, very subjective. And anytime you have a subjective application of any rule, it leaves room for a lot of conflicts. And that is precisely what happened there. So let's look at one of the first reasons, health. I found out that in the US, one of the reasons why they present their hairstyle codes in institutions and certain and many schools actually, is that there are about 6 million to 12 million people worldwide who still get headlights, by the way. And according to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, it's easy, and that's a statistic from the CDC. And they said it's easy to pick up it at school when children play together closely. And of course, you know that lice love long hair. And certainly I remember when I went to the RC Boys School, right? There was an outbreak of headlights and persons who asked to cut their hair. That is when I think a lot of people used to take what they used to call at the time Briner, after the famous actor Yul Brynner. Everybody had a Briner, but there was some reason for that because there was an outbreak of headlights. That is one. The second one I found out is safety, and that is another personal experience I could relate to. People with long hair risk having it catch fire during experiments at school and getting severe burns, right? I remember we used to have the chemistry lab at college, and I personally remember that happened to somebody. We used to go in there, you know, play around with chemicals and mix acid and so on, you know. So that was that was the second reasons of safety. The third one was physical education. It helped protect students against physical education lessons. For example, many schools say pupils need to have short hair and long hair, and long hair must be in a ponytail. And this prevents it from being pulled by other students or blowing in their faces and causing them to injure someone because they can't see, right? For example, like rugby in the States, and students could need to tackle each other. So that's three of the reasons. And the other one, which I pointed out, unnecessary distraction. Unique hairstyles can be a distraction. Natural and simple looks keeps students uniform, etc. And that distraction I've already mentioned with respect to my own personal experience, where you find that the persons that had the longest hair were asked to go to the back of the class so that they do not distract or obstruct students from viewing the board. So for me, you know, that is the hair debate. But quite apart from that, I think, you know, and I think the principal and the president and the teachers, the Principals Association and the Teachers Union, I believe, have already touched on the bigger issue of discipline. And that is where I believe that, you know, this discussion should really take us, right?
We'll go there.
I will stop it.
We'll go there in a while, Mr. Edwin, but let's go back. And I thank you so much for presenting the results of your research. So let's go back to two main points that you presented. The first one, the health implications, the health concerns, and you pointed to hair lice. And you say, according to the CDC, it's still prevalent across the world. So that's one. The second one you raised deal with safety of students, the length of hair, particularly students in the science subjects as well, use of fire and flammable substances in the labs, so to speak. I'll ask you to be frank, Mr. Edwin. How practical are these points now? And within the education system, you have male and female students. Our female students possess longer hair quite often than the male students. Isn't the hair lice a concern for them, and the safety accessing laboratories and flammable devices? Should we be asking our girls to cut their hair as well?
Of course not. Of course not. And I'm only saying that was only presenting these issues to give some sort of historical perspective as to why these codes crept in. And I think over time it had to do with somebody's perception of being groomed, well groomed, etc., looking uniform. You know, in the armies, for example, you understand, they still maintain certain hairstyle codes. You know, and I'm not defending this. I just believe that, you know, some of the reasons I advance that these things, etc., were introduced in the first place, one has to ask themselves, is it relevant at this time? And I suppose that is a question that you have to ask yourself, you know. But, you know, hardly, you know, I just believe that, yes, in discussing relevance, you understand, there are certain issues that we must never discount. You understand? We do not wait for some of these things to happen. The drafters and of some of these codes of conduct, etc., must have had some sort of basis. Not because they wanted somebody to look the way they look, or they wanted somebody to look nice based on their own perception of looking nice and presentable or well groomed. You know, so that is the. As I said, I just presented a historical perspective of it. I do not support the hair rule, but I just thought it was just an interesting why that rule. And I looked at. I mean, people talk about the black man and colonial times. They have schools in exclusively white states in the United States, right? Nebraska and all of these places. In fact, when Sky Suma's son had the issue, I remember looking up a school, a St. Mary's College in the US, which had similar hairstyle codes. In Ireland, all of these places are similar. So, you know, this thing about, let's debate whether it is relevant to our situation right now, then, you know, go into this fighting this black man and colonial times and that sort of thing like that. I just wanted to present this 4 issue to say, no, to me, this is not a black man thing. Yeah. There are other considerations that instructed the introduction of some of these hairstyle codes. Yeah.
And I accept that. Thanks for that clarification. Have we gotten to a time now, looking forward with the education system, where we have to balance individual rights of attendees and managing the institutional standard as well? And have we gotten to that point?
Of course, we have gotten to the point to review a lot of things. I mean, you know, you have learned so much things about. I'm not just hairstyle codes. That we have come to a point where we have to review so many things that causes this sort of conflicts. I mean, we have heard many times that, look, there are a lot of laws on our books that are unconstitutional. And even that I heard in the whole debate, the discussion about whether this is a constitutional rule or not. I mean, if you look at the Constitution, there is nowhere in the Constitution that speaks to your freedom to wear what you want, to put what you want, and so on. I think there's free. If somebody wants to use the whole freedom of expression that is guaranteed under the Constitution as one that you could consider, that you could wear your hair how you want. One could also further stretch it and say, well, all right, is somebody deciding to walk down the road naked also a freedom of expression? You understand? So we really have to know, where do we draw the line in allowing persons what to do, free to do what they consider to be free to, freedom of expression, or free to express themselves, etc. But you have to do it within respecting others' rights as well. You understand? Even the first thing I spoke of, it's not about yourself. You have headlights, but you also have to consider the person that is next to you, that you don't infect the other person with headlights and so on. And of course, even when they also used to have this sort of the older people, certainly my parents, they never wanted us to carry big hair because, of course, your tendency to catch a cold, to contract the flu, it presented a greater risk of catching the flu and so on. So I don't want us to just basically, look at just this as just a school rule, etc. But we have to broaden the discussion.
Right. Okay, so let's get some feedback from you to some of our contributors on the live feed, and we say to our viewers that the phone lines remain open, 4500777. Somebody says, and you share your perspective on that, Mr. Edwin. The kids are more concerned about hair and sexuality more than doing schoolwork. When was the last time kids were asking to add certain subjects to school, like physics? Have you ever seen school children asking for construction of a university on the island? Perhaps not much there for you to come in on.
Well, you see, generally, Shannon, I think our priorities, some of the things that we discuss, it begs to what we give more focus. I was looking at the criminal code, for example. I was looking at the criminal code, and the criminal code in itself. If you look at the part of the criminal code, I think there's a set of laws called nuisance laws. Nuisance laws, right? Where persons basically vending. If you look at, it'll be interesting to go through a list of these things that are rendered illegal under the criminal code, and we take for granted every day. You see, look at the amount of people just vending indiscriminately in town, having projectiles all on the sidewalk and so on. These are some of the things. I think, you see what happened there with this head thing. We have to broaden. This thing has to be broadened.
Absolutely. So
into other areas.
So you agree that it's the start of a healthy discourse?
It's a very healthy discourse, and I welcome the discourse. And and let's not just look at hair. You understand? Let's look at this whole question of the respecting of rules and regulations. I heard many persons, scholars of some repute, take this thing at an angle I could only consider as being unfortunate, right? Persons talk about the freedom to how we put it, the freedom to protest, right? Let's look at something. If everybody was allowed to protest, right, against something they consider to be right, and the masses, how chaotic would that be? If everybody, look at this
somebody will tell
right?
you. Somebody will tell you that's the basis of democracy, Mr. Edwin.
Let me tell you something. Well, if that is democracy, well, let me tell you something. I think we better go back into socialism or communism, because I don't want to live in a democratic state that instructs people to do what they want, when they want, and what they feel like.
Let's go back on here for a moment, and we don't design the headlines.
Yeah.
So I know you're growing worried that we spend too much time on these trivial matters.
No.
We absolutely don't design the headlines.
I'm not growing worried.
Right. But let's go back. When you attended school, you said that for practical issues, the male students with the bigger hair, the afros, were placed in the back of the class because they affected the sight of other students as well. I get that, but some people say to you, even back then, that rule was discriminatory and it targeted a certain demographic. it targeted the Rastafarians. Do you buy into that? And looking forward, you agreeing that the rule has to be amended. Do we first apologize to people who think that their individual rights would have been wronged?
Well, you see, we touched on that, and you see, and I don't know if you saw. Let's look at the parent who was involved in the issue, right? I don't know if you saw his response. Basically, why why he did what he did.
Right.
He cited that. Look, I got the impression in reading his response that he did not really support the kid breaking the school rules, right? In fact, if you notice, he had another child. The child abided by it.
Yeah.
But the other one, from what and he could clarify that, the other one, the impression I got based on what I'm reading into it, decided, look, I want to live my hair that way, and he said, having regards to the UN rights of the child, right? He decided, well, okay, you're going to have the child, allow the child to have his way, right? However, if these rights are violated based on his interpretation of what these rights are, right? Based on his interpretation of he's going to defend his child. Now, if you look at Article 28 of the UN Rights of the Child, right? It does not expressly provide for a child having their way to that extent. It says that children have the right to an education. Discipline in school should respect children's human dignity. Primary education should be free. Wealthier countries should help poorer countries achieve this. Right? That is the closest to what I interpret.
Isn't it an affront, or you trampling on somebody's right?
I'll have to ask for a break in a while. I'm just basically for me to relocate.
Sure. So let's quickly wrap up. Can we maybe wrap up in 10-15 before you relocate?
10-15 minutes?
Yes. Perhaps 5-10 we should be able to wrap up. Interesting discourse.
Okay, all right, 10 minutes. 10 minutes yes.
You pointed to the UN Charter on the Rights of a Child. Children are guaranteed the rights to preservation of one's dignity. If you're asking people to cut their hair, to enter an institution or to be part of an institution, isn't that an affront to person's right to preservation of their dignity?
I mean, that's stretching dignity. I don't know. Dignity extends to how you wear. If somebody asks you to wear your hair in a particular way, dress in a particular way, conform to certain standards that is not human. You see, human dignity has a lot to do with human rights. You have to put it against. Again, you have to basically interpret dignity against the backdrop of how you interpret human rights based on the UN definition of human rights. And I don't know that human rights give you the right to wear what you want, put what you want, etc., or violate other people's rights to their own dignity. You understand? Whatever you want to interpret that dignity to be, even the word dignity in itself, has to be defined. What is dignity? So it calls for a lot of. And I'm hoping that, in the redrafting of the rules, and I heard that they're calling for consistency of rules across the board. In the redrafting, there ought to be some sort of parameters set. Make the proper definition. Remove the subjective application of rules, etc. Because you see, the thing about it is, again, it's easier to. And listen to Suku, and if you look at the rule, it's easier for a black man's hair that grows up, right, straight up, to distract than you have races, an Indian or white person's hair going down, his shoulders, etc., etc. So it's easier to enforce such a rule against the black race as opposed to other races, But I suppose the jury will always be out on this. But what I would like is that, let the stakeholders. You see, I don't know if some of the people that are presenting themselves as as interested parties, if you like, fall into the realm of being stakeholders. You have parents. I have a form 3 student as well at St. Mary's College.
Yeah.
Right. So I am very close to whatever transpired. I'm very close to whatever happened. And it could be interesting. I don't know if anybody got Mr. Sion's perspective of this, because I think he was very much involved in the first case, the first very public case involving Sky Suma's son, right? And maybe you could get this perspective. He probably could give you some sort of insights of what transpired then.
You know us, Nigel, we absolutely made every effort to bring in Mr. Sion on this matter. He does not want to comment at this time.
I understand.
To preserve the integrity of this great institution. He thinks it goes beyond here.
I would imagine. I would imagine. Yes.
Is there a rule, Nigel, for us to meet at a level ground? Because there's some people who think the rule should stay and some people who think it is archaic. Is there room for us to meet in the middle?
I don't know. You see, if you have to rule on a level ground, etc., based on the 1 centimeter thing, I don't know how you will apply something like this.
Yeah.
And you have to leave it within the judgment of the principal. It's a difficult issue. It's a difficult issue. But I certainly believe that you just can't have, and goes back to my first point, you can't have students, etc., basically having hair that goes sky high in this thing, sitting down in a class in front of somebody behind them. You understand? So we have to be reasonable in the circumstances, but we also have to recognize that we have to live in a society of discipline, man. And that is my biggest issue, discipline. You understand? We have a societal breakdown in persons obeying rules, regulations.
I want to ask you 2 questions on how on the discipline and how it all fits in here. But we have a call, Nigel. I want you to listen carefully to the comments of the call, and then we continue our discourse. Good morning. Welcome to the platform. Good morning, caller. Welcome.
Hi. Good morning, Shannon. Good morning. Good morning to your guest. This situation that we are faced with I always have one question to ask insofar as the rights are concerned, Shannon, and is, if we allow everybody their rights, wouldn't that right invariably impede on somebody else's right? What is the purpose of school? Isn't the purpose of school the foundation to character building for the future? When you're going to start breaking rules from school, what foundation are you now setting for the future? And that's what I just find. I find that there are too many people clamoring for rights, and that is why the world is in such a chaotic way that it is, because invariably your right will always infringe on somebody else's right. So where do we draw the line, like Mr. Edwin was saying? Where do we draw the line? How are we going to resolve it if nobody is going to compromise for the greater good of the society, of the nation, of the world? Where are we going to ever come to resolution if everybody is going to keep clamoring for their rights?
Let's hold the line, caller. Mr. Edwin, you heard that contribution?
Sorry?
You heard that contribution? The caller was asking, where do we draw the line as a society?
It was a little muffled. I don't know if you could paraphrase it.
He's basically asking where do we draw the line as a society if everybody is given the opportunity to have their right and to enforce what they think is right.
Well, you see, and that is the bane of my argument. I mean, and I said it earlier.
Caller, you listen on online or on the phone?
I'm still there.
Okay.
I'll listen online for now.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, you're going to get a chaotic society if you allow everybody to do exactly what they have to do. You understand? So, I just believe that we must operate within an environment of rules and regulation, irrespective of how you may feel that rule is going to be. I mean, if everybody just says, I was being facetious. I was facetious about this whole issue when it first broke through. I said, well, look, if a parent just believes that he could basically allow his student or his ward or his child to go to school however he wants with his hair, etc. I mean, forget uniforms.
Not
Why tell him put a red shoe, a yellow pants, a green shirt? I mean, chaos.
Nigel, but isn't that what exists in the other jurisdictions who we sometimes point to for examples and we don't see chaos? Isn't that what exists perhaps in the United States of America? I'm just asking.
Chaos? No, but listen to me. You don't see chaos in American schools?
I'm just asking.
I mean, that I'm sure, Shannon, that's a question you could answer for yourself. But I am saying that, look, in the British schools, right, in schools that maintain a certain level of discipline, even in Singapore, we always want to model ourselves after Singapore, etc., and say, well, why is St. Lucia the same size as Singapore? But to what extent we want to follow the things that Singapore does?
Yeah.
You know, Singapore is based on persons following rules. They tell you cannot throw chewing gum on the ground, etc. You're going to take jail. You will take jail.
Yeah, the strong rules and the people are cultured to follow the rules in Singapore like that. Caller, let's have your final words and then we'll wrap up.
Yes, Shannon. So in closing, Shannon, I think if this hair situation goes through the court system and the parent comes out on top, I think this is going to open a can of worms, because I think there will be no end to the right to your rights. Because if I'm what do you call it, a child molester, and I figure it's my right to molest children, do I start a campaign and start saying, well, by the rights of molesters? Do I start campaigning, boy, you know I'm a murderer, you know I like killing people? Where is this going to stop if we allow a basic thing like hair, like your hairdo, to go to school with your hair properly combed, whatever, so that it's not too tall, it's not a distraction, it doesn't create a problem for somebody else? I mean, I really don't understand it. I think this thing has been blown out of proportion. I think this is all about egos, and people are just, that parent who is saying that he's supporting his child, I think he's supporting his child in the wrong way. He should be enforcing discipline on his child to let his child know that he's going to an institution where he found rules. And you need to follow rules if you want your society to progress in a positive way. If we're going to go down this road, already this country is in chaos, it's going to be worse. So I think they need to take some serious look at this thing and be very careful the outcome of this. That's what I have to say on this for now, Shannon. Thanks very much.
Thank you, caller, and we thank you for your contribution. Perhaps not opening a can of worms, perhaps we're opening a can of strawberries, because we get an opportunity now to design a better rule maybe, and not just say that we're allowing people to break the rules. Nigel, you know where I'm concerned moving forward? I'm concerned for members of the Rastafarian community. The students who have a right to an education as well, male and female. How do we accommodate them moving forward in a modern society? They need to go to school. Are we going to keep saying to these children in a tropical St. Lucia society, cover your hair for 6 to 8 hours? Is that realistic? Is that reasonable?
Well, you see, I will tell you something. I really do not have an opinion on this. I'll tell you what. You spoke about democracy, and I believe in the rule of democracy, and the majority rule, and so on. And some people that will tell you when it's convenient to the majority rule, etc., tell you sometimes the minority is right, based on the subjective application of what is right. I earlier mentioned that, you know, the whole question, what is the role of stakeholders? Who are the stakeholders to me? The teachers, the students, the parents. You understand? If it comes to somebody, a secret ballot, you know, you have give people that sort of forum for them to express themselves and so on. You know, come on, look, you have a situation. I don't know if you're following the thing, the unfortunate occurrences in Iran at the moment, right? A lady just decided, well, look, but she don't want to wear a hijab, etc. And then, of course, she was killed while she was in prison. You understand? Because of course she was arrested because she disobeyed a particular rule. You know, and you see the demonstrations and the protests all over the world against that thing. But is the Iran regime prepared to remove that rule? They consider these are religious sort of rule that they have made part of national law. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a process whether to review it or not. But at the end of the day, there's a school of thought. If you look at it, that the rule will remain because the majority of Iranians who are Islamic people believe that look, they're supposed to be identified in a particular way. You understand? Mm-hmm. But will the society just allow these persons to do what they want? I don't know. But the point I'm making is that look, we cannot just pander. And I'm not taking anything away from the Rastafarians and so on. We cannot always pander. You can't please everybody. You will never be able to please everybody, right? But your objective is to please the majority, right? You can please the majority and at the same time please the minority, right? As the Bible will tell you, you can serve God and the devil at the same time. It will not work. So, whether you could arrive at a middle ground, maybe that middle ground in itself, you will find that both sides of the divide may find something wrong with that middle ground because it does not appease them enough. You understand? Some people want all or nothing. So it will always be difficult to strike that set of balance. But to me, the only way I believe that, look, and here's my take here, if you're going to remove the hair rule altogether, I also believe that if somebody have a reasonable grounds, whether a student feel that your hair is distracting them, you also have to respect their rights as well. If I am a student and or my son sitting on behind you with a big hair and my son tell you he cannot see the board, is that not denying my son the right to an education because you're obstructing him?
I think there can be flexibility around those instances, and that's where we expect good sense.
You have to do it in such a way that it does not create. You see the same four things I read to you. You have to couch it in such a way that it does not create unnecessary distraction. It has to be. There must be a conditions. If there is an outbreak, if clearly your hair presents a safety issue for somebody else, etc., and that person could prove, then they could ask you to take corrective action. But I don't think it's something that could be totally disregarded, especially considering the reasons why that rule was introduced in the first place.
Nigel, I want to thank you for flipping the coin on this discussion, and I want to thank you for coming in. Interesting perspective. It's healthy, and I hope that it continues not just on the hair, but there are several other matters across the board with our laws that need to be reformed and need to be discussed in a like manner. So I want to thank you for coming on this morning, and then we'll keep close contact with you most definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just to say, but and let me just my parting comment. Sometimes we tend to be reactive or emotional about a lot of things. I just believe that most of the laws that were crafted, there was a reason why it's there. And, in trying to appease everybody, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's all I want to say. And let's recognize that this is more an issue of discipline as opposed to how high you grow your hair. Thank you very much, Shannon. Thank you for the opportunity. And of course, if any issue you believe that I am worthy enough to contribute to and to add to the debate, the discussion, I'll be willing to take up another invite. Thank you very much.
Lastly, Nigel, there are many in our society, some of whom went to school at St. Mary's with you, who will say to you that they had the afros, but they were never, there were never any issues within discipline. And
I told you so. There was never any issue. But listen to me, the hair rule was there. The hair rule was there. When I did my research, the hair rule was there. As a matter of fact, I was just talking to one of the older guys who went to school in the 60s. And he said, during the Black Power movement, when everybody started wearing the afros, etc., they realized that, look, because even before that, I told you about the headlines, they used to enforce it and so on. And it was liberalized after the Black Power movement, and everybody, afros came in style. And of course, a lot of us, the guys who went to school that we're talking about, they basically, came in soon after that era, and they all used to wear the afros and so on. I'm not debating that. Yeah. That is not the issue for me. I do not support the hair rule. Let me just say this. I do not support the hair rule. I think it's the subjective application rule. You cannot basically enforce a rule without, and of course, in a lot of rules that they tell, even the Constitution tells you that the only exceptions that you could have to enforce a rule that maybe that the Constitution tells you you're free to do is when there are safety, health, and so on issues and so on. So you cannot enforce such a rule, etc., and then you do not clearly state the reasons why you want to enforce such a rule, just do it arbitrarily. I also support. I mean, and I want to make it clear, but not just somebody just decide that rule wrong, take the law into your own hands. Where are we heading? Where are we heading? And that's the point I want to make.
We're heading down the road of democracy. I hear you, Nigel, and I thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Nigel Edwin, former student at the St. Mary's College, former Sumerian, advocate and social media influencer as well, coming in on the growing hair discussion. He says it's not a debate. I'm unsure if we have time for the head of the Anglican Church, who I know is viewing and he's standing by. I don't want to rush the interview with the Archdeacon. I want to give him sufficient time. The Anglican Church has a very important voice that we've not heard loud enough for quite a long time. So I want to give them enough time. I don't want to rush the interview with the Anglican Church. I will question them on some critical national issues. So we will reschedule the interview with the Archdeacon, head of the Anglican Church, perhaps for Friday of this week. Tomorrow, Thursday, a very interesting discussion on sports administration in St. Lucia. My guests include former government minister, sports youth development minister. She was also a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Sports for a number of years, Ms. Fortuna Belrose. I will also have with me Mr. Richard Petergin, former president of the St. Lucia Olympic Committee, and Mr. Edward Bellas. Mr. Bellas will also join the discussion, part one of our focus on sports administration in St. Lucia. Where are we headed? Win or lose? That's on tomorrow's program. You want to join us pretty early. So we'll make the adjustment and we'll fit in the head of the Anglican Church on Friday. You can't afford to miss that program as well. I know that a number of you have been reaching out. You want to hear our perspective. You want to see our coverage of the latest developments on the St. Jude Hospital. A lot of information now flowing from the walls of the office of the Prime Minister. Prime Minister Pierre was recently in New York City, the Big Apple, where he updated St. Lucians over there on his plans, his government's plans and vision for the St. Jude Hospital project, going back to the first phase of the project, the original St. Jude Hospital project site, updating the St. Lucians over in New York there. What was interesting from the Prime Minister's statement, I think it's the first time that we've heard him say that his decision to go back to the original St. Jude site is based on the advice that he'd received from two entities. Initially, we knew that the Prime Minister had appointed the committee of Ms. Alison Jean. It also had John Peters and several others who did that job for free. And they provided the recommendation after review of both sites to the Prime Minister and his cabinet that he should proceed with the original site. It was new and insightful to me now that the Prime Minister told St. Lucians in New York that his decision is also predicated on the advice given to him by experts within the Ministry of Economic Development. That was a new development. I don't think we've heard that before, and I'm subject to correction. So I know a number of you have been asking us to follow the coverage. We are, but we don't speculate. So we piecing through the resource personnel and we're staying on top of it. A number of individuals, special interests as well within engineering and construction. They continue to discuss the project and to liaise with us. So we are designing our continued coverage of the St. Lucia St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project, and pretty soon you will hear a lot more on that project. Next week we should have the former Minister for Economic Development. I've also promised you that on Friday of this week I will review some comments from Mr. Paul Hippolyte, renowned town planner and physical developer, who shares the view that the reports presented to the Prime Minister were inconclusive and do not bear weight. On Friday we will review some of his comments right here on the platform as we look ahead to what promises to be an exciting weekend. 9 o'clock on the clock in St. Lucia and across the Eastern Caribbean. Time flies so much here on this platform. It will be a very interesting discussion tomorrow, Thursday. Here is your invitation from now to join me for that. Tomorrow as well, we'll have a new sponsor on the program. Peter Malta joins us as the sponsor for the morning sports during Good Morning St. Lucia. So we welcome them on board. We say thank you to all the corporate entities who are joining our family here on Good Morning St. Lucia. I really appreciate your business, and we will be pushing your brand. Thank you to you, the viewers, for making this program what it is. Without your viewership, without your audience, we will not be on there every morning, and we thank you wholeheartedly for continue supporting us. You meet me on the streets and you say you love the program. I thank you so much. Continue to have a good day, St. Lucia. Continue making this program your choice in the morning. It's your morning cup of tea, and we will be here 6 a.m. God spare up until 9 weekdays, Monday through to Friday, right here on Hot 7 TV. On behalf of everyone, my name is Shannon Lamont. Do have yourself a wonderful Wednesday.